Welcome to MindShift Power Podcast, the only international podcast focused on teens, connecting young voices and perspectives from around the world. Get ready to explore the issues that matter to today's youth and shape tomorrow's world. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the MindShifter. And welcome, everyone. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm Fatima Bey, the MindShifter. This episode is about planting a thought seed in your mind. I want to explain something to you that most of you probably don't think about. Western civilization represents roughly just 20% of the global population. I want you to let that sink in for a second. Only roughly 20% of the world is considered Western civilization. US, UK, Australia, just to name a few. We often design content, products, and experiences for this 20%. That means 80% of the world's population is frequently overlooked, at least by us. Within that 80%, there is untapped potential. There are talents and ideas that we have never heard of, that we've never seen, we've never experienced, we've never had the opportunity to experience. Why? We don't cater to them. We only cater to the small 20%. We're so busy running around trying to impress one another in this 20% world that we're ignoring 80% of the world's potential. I'm going to explain something to you that really brings this home. I'm going to use myself as an example of what I'm talking about today. My website, I just rebuilt myself from the ground up. You can take a look at it. It's fatimabey.com. It's just my name. But I rebuilt my entire website recently. And my website is set up in a very particular way. If you visit it, you will notice that it doesn't really look that typical, especially for people in my arena, like other coaches and people in my arena. There's no big picture files. I only have a few videos. Very simple and easy navigation. In fact, I created a blog for each and every single episode of this podcast. So why would me, as an international MindShift coach, create a very simple website? It's pretty, but it's simple in functionality. Why did I do that? I'm going to explain to you why I did that. So within that 80% of the world, within those other cultures and other places in the world, connectivity to the internet is an issue. You see, here in the U.S., and in other places like here, we take internet connectivity for granted because it's just available to us. And we complain if something isn't fast. We are just used to this level of connectivity. Many parts of the world don't have that. That is actually a privilege and quite often expensive. And even in some places in the world where they do have connectivity, the issue is they have limited data. Just like we used to pay for minutes here in the US for our phones, many people in the world still live on that sort of system where they have to pay for data. That's a big deal. So and also the hearing impaired. So the hearing impaired, we often don't think about them when we create things. We kind of do things on the side for them, but we don't actually always think about them enough, I would say, because some people do. But the hearing impaired, I want to make sure they have access to my podcast as well, which is why I created the blog. I want every teen in the world, literally, who can, to have access to the impactful conversations that happen on this podcast. I don't just want to talk to the 20%. We have enough information already. We're going to use it or not. I really want to make sure that other 80% of the world, teens in the world can actually have access to the same things that you and I do, because they matter too. The other thing I did when setting up my website is I made sure that my website is translatable in over 50 languages around the world, because not everybody speaks English. Why does that have to be a barrier? Since they matter too, why not find a way to give them access? And my website automatically translates into the language of your location, basically. But you can also choose languages. Why did I do that? For the same reason I made the design simple. Because they matter too, and I want them to know that. I want them to have just as much access to everything else that we in the 20% world have. Now, I just use that as an example to strike a point. Let me give you some other numbers. Do you know that only 66% of the world has strong internet? That means 34% of the world does not have strong internet. So even if they could pay for data, they still might not be able to get it. Well, I think they matter too. So that's why I had a website set up easy enough where someone with low data can still navigate everything on there. And if they can't listen to the audio because it uses up too much data, they can at least read about it. Many countries sell data the way, like I said, the way we used to do in the US. And this can be very costly for them. I don't think most of you really understand what a big deal it is to navigate some of these websites that we create here in the 20% world. We want to be big and flashy and sell ourselves, especially coaches. So look at me, why you need my expertise, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff that we front load into our landing page on our websites, they take up a lot of data because we use a lot of big files, animations, videos. All of those things matter. You don't optimize photos. All of those things matter. And you know what that means? You're only going to reach the 20% because a lot of the people around the world can't load that. Correction, 34%, because we're talking about internet connectivity and that piece. That means there's a considerable amount of people that you're not reaching because you're focused on just a few. And this means that many of these people without internet connectivity strong internet connectivity, they don't have access to something that could change their lives. Because maybe you have the thing that they need to hear, but you haven't considered them. So they haven't mattered to. I want to give you this analogy. Ignoring the 80% of the world who is not Western civilization. Ignoring the 80% of the world is like picking up pebbles because they're close and not looking just a little bit further to see the precious gems that are worth even more. Are you ignoring gems out there while focusing on pebbles? There's a man by the name of Miles Monroe. He died in 2014, but he was one of the greatest minds of the last century. He really was. Look him up. He really, really was. Don't have time here to tell his whole life story, but I'm just going to point out a couple of things about him. He came from a third world country and used to sleep on a dirt floor with rats and roaches. He was told that people like him could never excel. He was literally told that. Fast forward to the future, he became very wealthy. One of the most, I don't know how many books this man wrote. He was an author. He wrote maybe 100 or so books. I really don't even know because I didn't look up the number, but he wrote many, many, many books. He was an author. He was a speaker and very, very wealthy. But the key thing I want to point out about him is he was an influencer to world leaders. I would say out of everything we know about the man, that was his biggest asset. He had the ear of world leaders, kings and queens and presidents and world leaders literally would listen to this man. And he was a Christian man, and he preached and taught from the Bible. And many of these people in the world who listened to him were of other religions and faiths, yet they listened to him. He grew up in a third world country. He was a part of that 80%. He was part of the people that people ignored. He was part of the ones who, you can't be anything. People like you don't go anywhere. Some of you are like, I would never say that to anybody, but you say it through action. Have they mattered too? To you? Some of the world's greatest inventions and cures are lying in places that we are brushing off or not considering. And I want you to take this, no matter what your age is, I want you to take this to home. What are you ignoring around you that might be a precious gem while you sitting around playing with stones, sitting around playing with pebbles, ignoring the gems that are down the street in the city next to you, in the state next to you, because they don't look like you, because they're poor, because they're whatever detail, fill in the blanks. What gems are you missing out on? Now I'll take a moment to talk to the teenagers in particular, teens listening to this or reading this right now. I want you to know that you matter. And I want you to know, I don't want you to be like the generations before you. I want you to be better. Be better than us. Be better than us who only pay attention to the 20% and miss out on the treasures of the 80%. Be better than us. Recognize the gems in life because you are the generation that's going to make this world better. We have already screwed it up. You are the people. You are the generation that can make this world better by making it different, by doing it different, by recognizing that there are gems around you and you just got to pay attention. Stop staying within the confines of what your culture has taught you. And I don't care what country you're from. All of us have cultures that have taught us good and bad. Every single one of us. Get outside, climb outside that box. Discover what's outside what your culture has taught you. Discover the precious gems that are out there. But the biggest gem I want you to discover is the one you see when you look in the mirror. Yeah, you. You are one of the most precious gems in the world. And I want you to know that. I see you and I believe that you are the most precious gem in the world. The greatest potential is usually untapped potential. What's in you, teenage boy, teenage girl, that's untapped, that you've hidden because it's not accepted? What's in you that you haven't let people see, that you haven't let out? What's in that great big mind of yours that you think no one will listen to? You probably have the answer to one of the world's problems, but you're not letting it out. I want you to know that you matter too. And to everyone listening or reading this out there, again, I want to plant that thought in your head. While you're sitting around playing with pebbles or focusing on pebbles, what gems are you missing out on? What great value are you ignoring playing with the 20% and missing out on the greatest potential of all time because you want to focus on the pebbles because they're close to your feet? Look a little further. Find those gems. And for any teenager out there listening, I really want to know that you're listening, that you're reading, whichever way. So if you go to fatimabey.com/podcast, or you can go to mindshiftpowerpodcast.com and send me a message. Let me know that you understand that you matter too. And I want to leave you guys with this thought here. There are gems that look like stones until you get close enough to see their brilliance. They matter too. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe to MindShift Power Podcast on any of our worldwide platforms, so you too can be a part of the conversation that's changing young lives everywhere. And always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.